So it's about midterm in first year, last term of the year. And we've learned all our connection methods and all our ability to free write. And they learned all their non-chord tones and cadences and small forms and things like that. And so one of the things we're doing is we're stretching their ability to apply these in more difficult textures and formats. And so this is Bach, Invention number 4 in D minor. And once we get away from chorale style or piano style, where you can clearly see the chords, as vertical structures, because they're either being played like or something like that, or even just, you can see them like, right? And you can just, line them up. And we get to these imitative structures like Bach has, these contrapuntal things. It can be disheartening, the difficulty that students have. And it's because they're just lacking some context. And so this is why we do this here. So the focus of this is to look at maybe 3 different ways that you can get context on what's going on here with the chords, so that you can do an analysis of this. If there were just stacks of notes, you could just say, what's this thing here? But because these are melodies, right? And even when they have 2 of these things going on at the same time, like right here with the left hand takes the melody over and it's like, right? And here, like the question comes for the student is like, how soon or how much do I have to analyze? Like, there's only 2 notes, right? And do they have to analyze here and here and here and here and here and here? It can become frustrating very quickly, and that's generally not the case. You can do that sort of thing, and it's an interesting microstructure thing to look at, but with a few guidelines in place, when we introduce this in class, for instance, I just give them the answers and we look at it and sort of explain, why, if the answers are there, then how do we see this? But we'll sort of do this in an assisted kind of way. This is in D minor, not F major. It's got the 1 flat, but it's D minor. And I think maybe 3 things that we can think about here. One is there some kind of repeated or habitual thing that Bach is doing here that we can, once we figure out it in one spot, then we can apply it to other spots that look similarly. I'll give you an example of this right here. Also, then, I guess, in combination, without jumping ahead, the second thing is chord progression. Chord progressions are important, and that's something we learn. This chord can go to this chord, but we learn it to regurgitate it, and sometimes it doesn't get applied well enough as we do analysis, but it's really important. So we're in D minor, and here's what we should be thinking first off, is at the very beginning, Bach is introducing his material to us, right? Happens to be this little melodic statement right here. It happens here, then it happens here, and then it happens here again, okay? And one of the things that makes Bach so successful with his counterpoint is that he can do all these interesting and fantastic things on the surface because his harmonic progressions and structure are so strong and easy to hear, and they're deliberate. So that being said, when you start a piece of music, and if I were to ask a class of students what chord were they likely to start on, they'd say it's the 1 chord or the tonic chord, and that's generally true. Okay, could be a different chord if it's jazz or if there's a special reason why you wouldn't, but in this case, we just look for the 1 chord. It's a D minor chord, and I just want to point this out for you right there. There's my D, there's my F, and there's my A, right? This is a D minor chord. I'm going to put it both as lead sheets and like Roman numerals right there, okay? But what's important now is to say, well, if that's a D minor triad, then that's a passing tone. and that's a passing tone. And this steps in and this skips out. That's an escape tone. And this is an important pattern to observe here. Again, if we see this structure again and it sounds similar or is set similarly, even if it's in a different key, good chance it's going to be a root, third, fifth, or at least chord tone, chord tone, chord tone, and these are going to be not chord tones. And that's really helpful because, you know, a lot of people might be looking here and going, well, is this D, F, A, or is it D, F, B flat? Is this a B flat chord? It's not so much at the first chord, but as we go along. But since we know that non-chord tone, non-chord tone, and non-chord tone, when we see this again in other places, we can kind of presume, or at least start investigating from that point of view, okay? And so, same thing here. If I say, well, what comes after the one chord and what's the most basic thing? 5, right? 5. And we can kind of confirm this here because we can see that there's the D, F, A when the second iteration of this happens, right? There's my one chord here. And you could say, well, this is a C sharp, E, and a G. Is that a 7 chord? Maybe. But I think what we'll find here when we investigate the melody is that this is a non-chord tone. This is an appoggiatura. And you might say, like, why? How would you know? I think one of the other things that we want to do is say, well, what are the things does Bach do? What is he known for? And he's known for compound lines, which means that he'll have a melody note, and then he'll have some more melody, but then he'll displace one of the notes in the melody by an octave. So you get this lower line sound, right? And you get the melodic gesture above, or vice versa. And so if we were to play this all the way through, right? And then we go up to the C sharp, and then we come down. So instead of octave leaping this, we would go root, or chord tone, chord tone, chord tone, chord tone, chord tone, right? You'd see these two as being framing this. It's a little less obvious when we skip into it. But when we see that, and we go, it's a 5 chord. In fact, maybe it's a 5/7 because we can count the G as the 7th for an A, C, E, G. It should be an A, C sharp, E, and G. And there's my A and my G and my E and my C sharp. And generally, although Bach uses 7s all over the place, at the beginning of a piece like this makes more sense as this being a non-chord tone. In fact, if you think of it, he is doing this thing where he finishes his first line and skips chord tone, non-chord tone to there, and then skips out and back again. So this is an escape tone, and this is an appoggiatura right there, right? Enter by step, left by skip, enter by skip, left by step, right? And these are my chord tones right here, and here, and here. And since 5s commonly have 7s on them, we're going to call that a chord tone too, right there. And we can put an inversion on this if you like. You can just go 5/7 or A7, but we can go, this is the third, so 6/5, okay? That's really, I mean, you might go like, well, I'm not convinced, but you'll see that this works out later when we see other chords, and we're trying to wrestle with, is this a chord tone, is this a chord tone, or is this a chord tone? When we get down here and we see similar structures like here and here, it will bear out that this is a non-chord tone right there and there. The pattern stays the same, okay? All right, so then let's just look at the next thing. He's inverted the counterpoint, meaning he went from nothing here, but then he puts it in the left hand. It's the same thing here. This is exactly the same as this, right? And there's my D chord, and there's this. And it's just, you know, he's trying to tell you that this is a 1 chord and a 5 chord. This is the key that I'm in. Here's the motive that I have. I'm going to do this scale up. I'm going to do this jump down and jump back up and scale down again. Everything else can be built sort of derivatively off of that. We can call this a 1 again, and we can call this a 5/6/5 again, right? And then he does it again, but up an octave. So mid, alto range, bass range, soprano range. It's almost like it's a fugue entries, although this isn't a fugue, right? And what he's done here is he's taken this first 4 measures and said, here's my idea, right? And then you think he's starting again, because he does start with the same thing. This is just inverted down to here, and this is now from the bottom, so it's inverted counterpoint. But this next section is doing something else, and that comes to the third thing that we want to know about when we try and do this kind of music is if we have an idea of the formula or the form of what's going on here, what the piece does, then we can anticipate things. And what the piece does, what inventions do, is they start in the home key and they give you a statement of their main idea, maybe once or twice, and they make a little sort of 4 or 2 measure thing, right? You can clearly find that. And then the music takes off. And it is changing key and has a transitional section, right? And then you'll hear it cadence. And when it cadences, hard cadence right here, I'll play through some of this for you to hear in a minute, then you know you're in a new key and you're starting a new section, right? And maybe visually it's not there to look at, but you'll hear this is a strong cadence right there. When this happens, we're going from the tonic or the 1 key to the key of the dominant, which is 5, or if it's in minor, sometimes we go to the relative major, which is 3. Okay, so we're either going from D minor to F major, that would be the 3, the relative major, or we're going from D minor to A minor. And when we get down here, and I'll just play this, you can hear, I'll actually play from right here. You can hear this cadence happen. It's like, right, so I'm right there, right? And now we're at 17 right there, and you hear this cadence, right? Perfect authentic cadence, and this is an F and this is an F, and this is going to be my root 3rd and 5th. It's the same figure as up here. We got our notes right here from our chord, like that. This is an F chord right here. So, and this is my new 1. Now the truth is, and this is a cadence that confirms that. Truth is, we'll be in the key of F earlier than this, but this is where it's declared. Right? This is where you know it wasn't transient. It was a real thing, okay? All right, let's build our cadence backwards and then we'll fill in the gaps. But knowing that we state the idea, right? And then we take the idea and we do stuff with it and we transform it and we are basically changing key. We're doing a transition section, right? Bach will do this usually by using sequences. And so we'll talk about that and we'll see this here. But eventually he'll be in a different key and then he'll do a strong cadence and then he'll do his next reiteration of the main theme again, and it's like the second part, or maybe this is the first part and this is the second part, and it will be in this case the relative major. And we can see this because right there it's like right, and then it's the same thing, right? It's that same idea, and now we're in the next section. Okay, today for this video and what I do in class and did in classes, we're just going to look at this section right here. Up to that point, we won't get into the more complicated harmonic structures. This is our first foray into saying, well, how do we deal with this more difficult, thinner texture, right, with all these moving notes? Okay, so let's take a look at this next section. I think the next thing that we want to take away from this is harmonic rhythm. How often do the chords change? Well, looks like about once a measure. Right? So we don't want to be going here and looking here and looking here and looking here, right? We just need to look about once a measure. And you can see actually in the off hand, not the melody hand, that these structures kind of look like they're giving away parts of chords or melodies running through chords and things like that. But the thing is, they're grouped together, they're going to be chords, okay? And if we know about our chord progression, that can really help. Like for instance, after a 5 chord, what do we usually get? We usually get a 1 chord, and this is another reiteration of this. So this is a 1, but now that this is in the bass line, that's a first inversion chord, right? But 5 goes to 1, right? And then 1, well, this is the reiteration of this, so this is going to be my 5 chord again, right there. I've got my A and then C sharp and E and G, and this is my C sharp and E and G right there. This is a 5th of the chord, so it's going to be a 4-3 inversion, okay? And then what comes after 5? Well, 1, right? That's what we've been doing. That's what we know. And if you look, here's my 1 chord, D, F, D. This is my F and a D, and then I rise up and I get to my F and my A again here. I'm going to point these ones out because we're in a new place here. Chord, 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 chord. This is all chord right there. And 5 goes to 1. And we don't have to guess at which ones are right and which ones are wrong, because it's going to confirm for us in our ears what our theory tells us is that we're going for 5 chords. So from here, let's see, got to reach over to the piano, or like, and then 1, right? Right? So you can hear that. Now, we're entering into this middle part, which is the transitional part. We got to get to the other key, and the way that Bach loves to do this is by sequences. And the most famous of sequences is, of course, circle of fifths, and that's what's going on. Again, if we really wanted to, you know, we could sort of hack this out and see, but I kind of want to use these strategies to help us. Like, for instance, see this right here? This is a root, and then third, and then steps up, right? Okay. And we know from our chord resolutions that thirds, of course, like to step up into the root of the other chord, right? And also, we know that this is a pattern that seems to be repeated here. It looks the same. It's just a step down. And sequences like to step down. So this goes up a fourth, and then down a fifth, or a step down, right? And then from here, it goes down a step as well. Up a fourth, down a fifth, up a fourth. This looks like a circle of fifths to me, right? So we can go linearly through, but we could also just say, like, well, if this was my root, right? And this is a 1 chord, then this is my root right here, C, C, E, E, C, G. This is a C chord right there. And that's my subtonic 7 chord. I should write some more of these things here. This is a D minor chord. Oops, wrong colored pen. And this is a C major chord, right? All right, circle of fifths. What does D go down by a fifth to? The answer is G, and there's your answer right there. Okay, so if this is a circle of fifths, this is going to go D minor to G minor to C, right? And C is going to go down to F. Okay, so let's just take a look at this now. We're expecting a G chord, G minor in this case, right? And there's the G, and this is a, I'm going to circle this. There's my B flat, there's my D, there's my G, and there's my B flat. And do you see how before, when we saw this figure, we said this is not a chord tone right there, it's an appoggiatura, right? It's the same idea, and that helps us not have to worry about, is the A part of the chord or not? I mean, we skipped into it. It's even more apparent that this is what we call that compound line, where it should have gone up to the B flat, but he flips it down by an octave to give us this sort of duplicate top and bottom line. Because if you listen, and I'll put this B flat up above, it's, and same thing here. You should go up instead of the octave. It starts to sound like anime music, like Studio Ghibli. That's because they're really smart. They know about this. But instead he flips it down. But this is G. You could say this is the 7th if you want to. You don't have to, right? Root position at the beginning here. And G is my 4 chord. And that's a 5th down. And a 5th down from 4 is subtonic 7. And from subtonic 7 will be 3, which should be an F chord right there. And if we look, we had C and E and G, right? F, same spot as this. Not chord tone, not chord tone, right? So our chord tones again are going to be here, step up to that one, not that one, that one, and that one. Same pattern. Once you see a pattern, it's not 100% guaranteed to be the same, but there's a good chance, and that's where you want to start looking at. So, yeah. Okay, now, the truth is, we've actually changed the key of F, and the rest of this stuff will be in the key of F, but without the strong cadence, it sounds like we're playing around in the area of the 3 chord. But you need to go to the end of the line and say, well, how do we cadence F? Now we can interpret backwards into these things, okay? So what happened is, somewhere in the sequence, you either just say that, you know, this now equals 1 in F, right, from here on out, or you can say somewhere in here is your change, right? Because D would be a 6 chord, this would be a 2 chord, and that would be a 5 chord if we're in the key of that. Somewhere in here you're going to pivot chord on it, or you just say we've arrived. Okay, so Let's see. Let's take a look at this right here. We have this, and we have this thing up above that's repeating, right? Like that. Okay. So let's take a look at this that's happened here already. It's now down here. See, he's inverting his counterpoint and adding a different one right here. Well, inverting, he's putting it in the bottom, sorry. And so root, root, not a root. Okay, so sorry, chord, chord, not chord. So we look here, it's gonna sound the same. This is gonna be my chord tone and chord tone and chord tone and chord tone, like that, right? And that makes a G, B flat, and D, right? This is part of the chord, that's part of the chord, that's part of the chord, that's part of the chord. And these are, you know, harmonizing when they're not. But it's a G, B flat, D chord. And we'll think in the key of F. I'm gonna stay with the red pen here. That would be a 2 chord, wouldn't it? G, right? G minor. And if you want to, since this is the first note, you can put a 6 there if you like. Okay, so now that we're in the key of F, we've gotten away from the circle of fifths. We're still doing sequences in terms of reusing the material and stuff like that, but we're no longer going to do circle of fifths because he's gotten us to our new key. We're going to play around here and then cadence really strong right there. So what comes after a 2 chord? Let's go back to our idea again of what goes after a 2 chord. 2 chords are the last or lowest class of predominant, and they like to go to, sorry, the lowest of the best class of predominance, and like to go to 5s, which is a C chord, all right? So this should be a C chord right here, and that should be a 5 chord, right? Let's take a look at this. Remember this figure right here? It's the same figure as that one right there, which tells me that that's going to be part of the chord. This is probably a non-chord tone, and then this chord tone. And then if it's a 5 chord, it could have a 7th on it. And let's just check it out. C, E, G, not a chord tone. B flat is my 7th, not a chord tone. So C, E, G, another G. We're going to make that be honorary because 5 chords with 7ths are common, right? And so this is a 5-7 chord, 3rds in the bass at the beginning, 6-5. And then you say, well, what does the 5 chord like to go to? It likes to go to a 1 chord, right? And that means that we'd be going to an F chord right here, okay? And F chord, well, this is the same figure is here as at the beginning when we started to look and say, like here, it's the chord tone down to the root and then scale back up. This is my root, there's my F, my A, my C, right? And my F and my A and my C, right? And you might say, well, what about that right there? You can call it a major 7 if you like. I don't have a problem with that. At a very local level, it's actually alternating between things that are 1 chord and things that are 5 chord and things that are 1 chord and things that's a 5 chord. That's very common, but overall, I would still play an F chord during this time if I had to accompany on guitar or a chordal instrument or something like that. So if you want to call that a major 7th, you can. It's fine. It's harmonizing this idea again, right? Like this would have been my 7th right there, so I could be 6-5. This could be my 7 right there, so I'm 1 major 6-5, right? Okay, it's great. I'm just going to play from here so you can hear that it's still a sequence. This happens and this happens, and this goes down a step and happens to there as well. It's just not the old one that we were doing. So, and then appoggiatura, that's my 5 chord, and then I do it again now on the 1 chord, right? And it's going to go down again. Okay, and now we're getting set up for our cadence coming up pretty soon here. But that would mean that this is not a chord tone right there. And this is going to be B flat, D, F, right? B flat, D, F. Knowing that this was an appoggiatura way up here is so good. So many students would struggle with that and say, well, is this a D7 chord? And this is my D and this is my 7th? Or they would go, which one is the chord tone? I don't know. But we know that it's not, so we don't have to think too hard about it. B flat in the key of F is a 4 chord, right? 4, 6. This is my B flat chord. Because we know we're in the key of F, cadencing F, we can be pretty sure about all these things. And then, well, what comes next? Well, this is that same sort of thing where it skips down and then scales up. So chord tone, chord tone, chord tone, chord tone, C, E, G. There's my B flat and a G again right there. This is a 5/7 chord, right? And this is an inversion, so 6/5, like that, okay? And again, what comes after 5? 1 likes to come after 5. This is the same figure as all these other ones where the top one is an appoggiatura and it's not part of the chord. F, A, C, right? C, A, F. So my chord tones right there. This is a 1 chord. It's a 1, 6. And you see how Bach is careful not to give us a root position 5 going to a root position 1 because he doesn't want to sell it as the cadence, right? That's not going to happen until we get over to the very end there, right? Okay. Because we understand our chord progression sequences, like this chord likes to go to this chord the most of the time, it helps us know what we're looking for. It rules out a bunch of unviable or less likely scenarios, and we can profitably look for what our ears are already hearing. We're hearing it work. So, you know, from here, we're on the 1 chord, and you're like, right? And then we get this sequence. And then it bails out of this and starts to give us a top line that says we're coming to a cadence. But still, it's like, right? And then this last run, right? And now, here's our cadence, right? And if that sounds familiar, it's because it's the strongest of possible cadences we can have, which is a perfect authentic cadence, but even more than that, it's a perfect authentic cadence that has been ornamented with a 1/6/4. Let me show you how that works here. Whenever you see this kind of thing like this, and you see, you know, mi and re, it's going to be a 1/6/4. So here's my 1 chord right here. It's in root position with root on top as well. Here's my 5 chord right here. It's a C and a G. This is an anticipation of that note, which is also even strengthening the cadence in a way. But this would make it a 5 chord right there. And that would be like a C. But remember, this ornament actually lines up with this, and this is pushed over to there, and that's the A. And if you think F, A, C over top of a C, going to a C, E, G over top of a C, sorry, C, this is a 1/6/4 going to a 5. That's what you're hearing. You're hearing, I'll play the whole chord, you're hearing this. Right. It's just only 2 parts, but again, knowledge of the sound of and what's important in the framework of a 1/6/4/5/1 cadence is all you need. It's there and you're hearing it. You just don't have every note there, but your experience in your ears will tell you otherwise. And then we'll confirm for you what it is. Now, what do we do between a 1 chord and the 5 chord? Because this is going to be written like this. This is going to be 1/6/4, and then you're going to put a bracket underneath it and call the whole thing a 5 chord. This whole thing right here is a 5 chord. Okay, so we need a predominant, right? And if you look, we go from here, these things right there, right? And then, right? So la, fa, so, do, right? This is, well, let's think about this. If I'm in the key of F, a 4 chord is B flat, D, F, and a 2 chord is a G, B flat, D. And that kind of, and maybe the F on top as well. And I kind of feel like that's what's going on here. I've got a G and a B flat and a D and an F. You might even say 1 is one and 1 is the other, but I just going by so quickly. It just feels like a 2, third in the bass, 6/5, right there. It's a G flat, or a G, sorry, minor 7 chord, right there. Yeah, and this is a perfect authentic cadence because root position, 5-chord root position, 1-chord root on top as well. And so it's the way we cap off the section. All right, so we learned some things about Bach, right? But more than that, what we tried to do was employ strategies that help us when we get to less complete, i.e. only 1 or 2 notes at any vertical moment. And these contrapuntal, these highly like elaborative sort of lines and textures. And we get a basic idea and we learn from it, and we confirm that we're right by reiterations of it around different places. And then we slap in our harmonic rhythm knowledge, which is we're looking for a chord every measure, except maybe at the cadences it speeds up. And then we think about, well, what is the most logical and obvious strong chord progressions, right, that are legal, that are normal, because that's what's underpinning in the engine under which Bach can write all these things. Okay, I hope that's useful. If you know, whether you're looking at this from the internet perspective, you just stumbled upon this, or you're a student that missed a class, or you're a student that's reviewing, you know, this is what we're hoping for here, is that your scales and your chord spelling are all good, and that your chord recognition, note reading, and then knowledge of chord progressions and keys is strong enough that you understand what we did here. If any of those areas are weak, this becomes exponentially more difficult, but you can just work on that and tighten that up. You get help by spelling chords or going back to charts in textbooks about what chord likes to follow what chord, that kind of thing, and practice calculating circle of fifths in different keys on scales and things. It's really useful. And if it starts to make sense to you, well, you should be encouraged, because that's the first sort of recognition step. If we're to turn you loose on another invention, some of it will make sense, and some of it you still won't be able to work out, because every invention has different melodic gestures and different counterpoint and slightly different chords and devices, although they have similar formulas in them. And then, you know, you do what you can, and then we take you through that one. And every time you do it, you get a little more proficient, and you gain more experience, and you remember what happened in a different piece of music. And everything that we did here can apply to its 3-part, like sinfonias and trios and things like that too, right? Even the fugues and things. This is a great place to start. Okay, cheers.